Hello, welcome. My name is Axel Wieder. I'm the director of Bergen Kunsthall, and I'm happy to show you today in a brief tour through our current exhibition, the festival exhibition in 2020 by Joar Nango. We're starting here in the foyer. It's our entrance space, round space, very beautiful, and there's also a piece by Joar already in here. It's called The Same Rope That Tanya Will Pull You Up in the End, and it's a brass ring and a piece of wood, Riebort, typically used in Sámi architecture. Joar Nango is born in 1979, and he has a background both as an architect and an artist. He studied architecture in Trondheim, in Bergen and Berlin. And he has a Sámi background, and he has, from his background, a strong interest in Sámi traditions, in building techniques. And this piece, in a way, is a good entryway into this interest because it combines a traditional element with a kind of more specific interest in these traditions. From his interest in research, Joar's take on traditions is very specific. He's not so much interested in a formal vocabulary, in the way that Sámi architecture looks, but in principles that underpin or that are underlying in this architecture that relate to the nomadic lifestyle, a kind of contextual way of living, making use of nature and also making use of scarce materials. And this rope is a good way of starting to talk about this interest because it combines two materials. It's on the one hand dried reindeer skin, which is the traditional material in Sámi culture, but it's also a second material which is maybe more known by Norwegian people living in Norway today. It's a kind of pink fiber that is used that's used for wood packaging. If you buy wood in a supermarket or in a building store, it comes in plastic bags, and these bags are made out of pink fiber that's very stable but not very nice to touch, and usually it's of course like also just thrown away after unpacking the wood. And Joar used this fiber together with reindeer skin to make a rope, and in a way it shows this interest of making use of what's there as something that's to him more kind of Sámi than just the reindeer skin alone. It's a kind of more contemporary approach to even the questions of how can we make use of leftover materials, how can we make use of what we have at hand, a kind of improvisational talent that is also saving our resources. And then maybe we go in where we have slightly better sound conditions. Today is Monday, and we have the spaces all for ourselves. I wanted to mention briefly the history of the festival exhibition. It's this year's festival exhibition for the Bergen Kunsthall, as I mentioned. And this exhibition is a very important tradition for contemporary art in Norway. It exists since the 1950s and was initially founded as a part or in parallel to the big music festival, the Festspillene, in Bergen, that happens every year in summer. And in parallel to this festival, the Kunsthall organizes since more than 50 years, 60 years, almost 60 years, almost 70 years, organizes the festival exhibition. So each year an artist is invited to make a very large-scale, solid, big exhibition that is also seen by many people as this kind of one of the most important exhibitions of contemporary art in Norway. So if people in Bergen go to see one exhibition per year, it's the festival exhibition. And for us it's a format almost like the Turner Prize to really highlight one artist's practice. It's usually an artist who has a practice that's very relevant for today. It's not necessarily young artists. Sometimes we also select older practitioners. But it's really this format to highlight a practice, and the that also gives us a chance to discuss what we think is relevant in contemporary art today. So this year we selected Joar. It's kind of not maybe a typical choice, because it's on the one hand it's an artist who has a training as an architect, so it's a practice that's more interdisciplinary, and it's also a practice that works a lot with collaboration. So a lot of people have been involved, while the festival exhibition is typically a solo exhibition format. So we worked with this exhibition with Joar Nango, but also with 16 other practitioners very closely, and many more people in a kind of more expanded sense. It's a very collective exhibition that's really built on a practice of collaboration. And we have 4 exhibition spaces with a set of projects that are in parts ongoing, like they're almost like production platforms for Joar, and each of these projects is usually taking place or is developed in collaboration with people. So each project also in a way describes a set of collaborations. Here in this space, the first space within the exhibition, it's one installation called the Geyugumpi, or the Sámi Architecture Library. And the project basically consists of an ongoing collection of books and texts and other materials that Joar started to collect in response to a kind of missing point that he noticed in his own architectural education. And that was, he noticed that Sámi architecture from the north of Norway, or from Sápmi, the part of Scandinavia that crosses Norway, Sweden, Finland, and up to Russia. That architecture, traditional architecture there, is hardly ever touched upon in architectural education. If anything, it's a kind of side note that maybe shows some more folky examples. Typically labus, the living units, living tents, and in response to this kind of like underrepresentation of traditional architecture, Joar started to collect books that try to describe what he finds interesting in architecture, Sámi architecture, or in a broader sense also indigenous architecture on a broader scale. Like there is still not such a very strong academic research onto this topic, so he started to explore what this topic could actually mean in an interdisciplinary sense. So if you look at the books, some of these are architectural, others are theoretical, but we can see that it's really a kind of exploration of this topic, what this topic could actually mean, how this topic could be interdisciplinarily explored from different sites in different areas. And the architecture, this library is actually really interesting and fascinating and quite substantial, because the material is so different. There's some more mainstream titles which are included to also highlight the way that indigenous architecture is now embraced, maybe from a kind of more popular or broader kind of perceived angle, but also really very nerdy and hard to find stuff, like from university, like doctoral theses that were published in small editions, to self-published material, cutouts from magazines, films, some materials. Maybe one thing to show is not only books, also actually a hammock. And the hammock is made, it represents, or it's actually, it depicts the facade from a famous living unit that was built for Greenlandic people in Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, a kind of building made by the Danish authorities to house Greenlandic people. A kind of infamous building, and it was brought into this library basically as a hammock, as a pattern for a hammock. So this shows maybe also an interest into different materials that could represent knowledge, not only books, but also weaving, for example. How can knowledge be translated into a piece of weaving? And then another important piece of collaboration is, so this is, as I said, the Geyugumpi, the installation, the library, and usually the library is housed in a the Gilligumpi, a herder's hut on sledges. We had to disassemble this for the exhibition, and we left it in this disassembled state to really kind of create a new space within our exhibition spaces. And the paintings on the roof and on the walls are made also as an ongoing process with Swedish painter Anders Sunna, who will represent Sweden in the Venice Biennial 2022 in the Sámi Pavilion that was recently announced to take place the first time, or to take over actually the Nordic Pavilion. But this is one of these ongoing important collaborations where Joar works together with other artists on shared projects. So Anders was working here in the exhibition spaces in preparation of the exhibition, making these, continuing his work on these paintings, and some of them are based on photographs and drawings by Joar. This space is very different in atmosphere, and maybe important to look first down the middle axis towards the screen, which is lit by it's lit with a video projection and a sound piece. The sound is by Rishaug, and the images are made by Markus Garvin. So this work is called Skierbar. It's a video projection screen made from dried halibut stomach. We can see it now. We can't really smell it, but actually the smell in this space is a very important component. There's some dried grass, some birchwood, and these halibut stomachs, which have still a kind of very organic smell. The title of the works, and actually the material, it's part of a project that Joar started by discovering this word while learning Sámi, the language. He found the word skierbar and was curious to figure out what it means. And it basically describes an old technique of making windows from dried halibut stomachs, but it's a technique that's not really known anymore or used anymore. So to understand how it works, Joar had to figure out, to basically try it. And this experiment then became the work. So he tried to use dried halibut stomachs, and they weren't really clear like windows. They looked more like a back protection foil. So in a way, one way of using it for Joar was to make this back protection screen for this work that was initially shown for the in the architecture triennial in Chicago last year. And we now expanded it with more dried halibut stomachs into a larger screen that takes over this space atmospherically. So it's almost like it's a space with a very specific atmosphere, as I said, and it's also a space that invites to gather, or to basically a space that it's made for use, because besides this screen there's a set of tents, so-called rakas. These are the inner tents that are used within labus to separate the labus in different spaces and to make it more comfortable. And so these tents here, they have prints on them, historic images that were made in the 1750s by a missionary and a draftsperson who accompanied this missionary, Knud Lem, as documents describing the lifestyle, the way of living in Sápmi. It's one of the first and most comprehensive resources that until today describe traditional ways of living of Sámi people. And it's an interesting document because it's very ambivalent. It's on the one hand, it's very detailed and describes Sámi life. Then on the other hand, it's made by a Danish missionary on behalf for the Danish crown. So it comes with this colonial interest of exploration and description, kind of exotic interest. So some of the drawings that you see, they also look a bit like animals that the person drawing the animal hasn't really seen before. The reindeer. And then over here we see this beautiful drawing of a larva with people organizing themselves living in the larva. And it's a kind of mixed perspective. It's on the one hand, it's a plan looking from the top, but then the people are shown from the sides. It's just mixed perspectives. And so these were drawings that have never been published. They were used as studies for etchings for a famous book by Knudlem. Beskrivelse over Finnmarkens lapper. It was published in 1767. And these drawings, which are a bit older, as I said, they have never been published, but we got access to the archival material and were able to use them in these new works in which Joar is appropriating this material in almost like in a détournement of the material itself in these tents that were produced together with Katarina Speaks Skum. And then here it's another project or another collaboration of yours together with his partner, Canadian artist and publisher Tanya Busse. It's an ongoing project called the Nomadic Library, which consists of remakes of historical publication that relate to the politics around the north. So there's two previous publications, one reprint of publication by Kata 79, one of the first kind of activist moments of Sámi, and the second magazine called Bandbären, kind of magazine, countercultural magazine coming from the north. And we made a third edition for this exhibition together with some writer and artist Marik. She made, it's based on a series of energy paintings she has made previously, which are turned into these kind of big banners that take over the space, and then also a set of 3 posters that represent these paintings, but also good spells for the city of Bergen. This space focuses on the project European Everything that started around Documenta 2017. It started with the trip of Joar and collaborators from Tromsø in the north of Norway down to Athens. And as it happens, this trip from Tromsø to Athens crosses through the whole of Norway. And he traveled with a car, a red, kind of red colored Mercedes transporter that has played a big role, a huge role in many of the projects of Joar Nango and the collective FFB, an architecture collective that he has worked with in the past. And this red van is maybe a good entryway into this space because it's a kind of a metaphor or a tool within processes that require mobility. So this van has taken on many different roles. It used to be a mobile workshop, but it's also a mobile living unit, and of course it transports people across countries, across borders. And in this trip from Tromsø to Athens, it was a kind of research travel to look into the dynamics and exclusions that happen or that exist within Europe. For example, towards Roma people. Roma people that Joar visited on this travel in Romania, and where he kind of started to become interested into the dynamics that exist even within a kind of unified political entity such as the European Union. There are still mechanisms that exclude people for reasons of race or being part of a certain community. And so in this project, Joar started to work specifically with one collaborator, Lajos Gabor, who is a coppersmith, usually based in Romania, and he started to work with him on material. And so the way this space is about the movement of bodies, but also materials within the kind of contemporary social political conditions. There's some materials that really come from recycling or waste circuits that are picked up from trash yards and reused, such as these materials. But then there's also this hut that is in a way literally rebuilt from leftover materials from this car. The roof is made from a door that had to be exchanged from this red Mercedes Sprinter that I mentioned before, and the oven is also made from some materials that became leftovers, and the oven was itself used within this car. The hut itself, it's a copper metal workshop that was set up by Lajos Gabor, the coppersmith, who worked with us over several weeks in preparation of the exhibition here. Initially outside of Kunsthall, in a kind of public prelude, where he worked in public space and also in interaction with visitors or people that just passed by and were curious to see what's happening. And so he set up this workshop himself, including materials that he used and some works that he produced here for the exhibition. The horse trailer is another mobile unit. We couldn't get the Sprinter van in here; it's too big. But the horse trailer is it's another vehicle. And with horses, especially connected to Roma culture. And some copper works by Lolly. And then maybe we just quickly talk about the last space, which is because of the conditions of exhibition making, but also the society in general these days, with working under regulations for infection control, we could not open the exhibition to the date that we initially planned as the starting date. And with the postponed timeline, we started with a kind of first chapter. We used the kind of energy and the free time that we had set aside for the exhibition to work with collaborators on a TV show to introduce some of the themes and some of the collaborations for the exhibition. TV show, so it was a kind of three-part video series that was broadcast through our channels, but also the festival that I mentioned, Festspilne, who held a digital festival this year, so we could use their platforms as well. So many of the theoretical strands and many of the collaborations become visible and talked about in this TV series called Post-Capitalist Architecture TV that Joar filmed with the red Mercedes Sprinter van while traveling through northern Norway, and having meetings, having Skype conversations, and talking about many topics that play then out in the exhibitions, in the exhibition here, but in a perspective of preparation and also in a more theoretically explicit way. And I'm not sure if it's possible to film, but so 3 episodes, very rich material. You should try to find those, have a look, they're on our website. As you see, this is a very rich, very complex and very detailed exhibitions. There's a lot of things that I could continue talking about, or that we could explore, and really lots of details. But I hope this gave an impression. There's more material available online on our website, or I think there's also like a couple of reviews that are interesting to read in English. Some are videos. We have some talks that took place here in some of these installations with some of the collaborators. Those are also filmed and documented online, and have a look. Check them out. It's interesting, and thank you.